Chapter 52. Since Midway Magnetic was situated in the middle of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, the environment surrounding the facility was nothing short of spectacular in terms of its beautiful vistas of pine forest and sheer granite cliffs. It was the pinnacle of high-tech and nature rolled up into one place. That combination, though, was the last thing on the minds of those gathered in the portal room after Jason first stepped through the opening, leaving them and arriving on the island. They were all watching intently as he spoke to the Galimarians in the park. It was then that Admiral Brinstock received a call on his private line. The sound of a cell phone down in the deepest reaches of the underground facility was quite a rare event. But then again, the Admiral's cell phone was one of the most secure cell phones on the market these days. He was able to get reception only because cell signals were repeated down here, and only for encrypted phone conversations, such as the one he was receiving now. Watching Jason talk to the aliens was certainly capturing his attention, and he was rather irritated at receiving this interruption until he saw it was someone calling from the USGS field office at Yellowstone. He had a passing thought that perhaps they were too late with what they were trying to accomplish, since Jason hadn't done anything yet. He was still talking in the park. Brinstock here.
Admiral, this is Dr. Morrison from the USGS. There have been some critical changes in the Yellowstone volcano I need to share with you.
Okay, hang on a second. Looking over to Lieutenant Flume, he said, I have to take this. Pay attention to what happens and report it to me when I return.
Yes, sir. Walking off to a more secluded part of the portal room, Kenji continued his phone call, while Jason continued speaking with the Galimarians in the park. Terry was translating what was being said, and Larry came closer to hear her. He just told the other guy he's never seen anybody else clothed like that. I think he also said something about Jason's ears, but it's a little hard to hear. Who said that? Asked Larry, knowing he had missed some of the events in the portal. The Galimarian on the right, of the one next to him, replied Terry. Looking at Jason, Lieutenant Flume observed that he had taken a non-aggression stance. Jason had put his bags down and was standing there with his hands folded. Smart, thought Larry. He's a cool cucumber with these people so they don't get too excited. There was more said by one of the aliens. Then the whole group of them seemed to gasp. What happened? Asked Diana. That woman just said she's seen someone like this before, but they wouldn't believe where she thinks he's from. Then she said he is human. Apparently they know who humans are, and I think they're a little scared about it. Scared? Asked Larry, who had now become part of the conversation. Why would they be scared? When you think about it, said Terry, they purposely isolated themselves for thousands of years, so there's no telling what perceptions about us they might have. Keep in mind that thousands of years ago, mankind was nothing like it is now. They probably think humans are still like that. I guess that makes sense, said Dennis. The crowd had been stirred when they figured out Jason was human, but then another one of them was trying to speak, and with his gestures, apparently asking them to quiet down. He started speaking, and when he finished, Terry let out a chuckle. He just told the group not to get too excited because Jason must be bewildered and they don't want to scare him. Larry, Diana, and Dennis started chuckling themselves, and as Dennis was laughing, he looked toward the far end of the room to where the Admiral was talking on the phone. Apparently, due to the noise in the portal room, he had the cell phone pressed to one ear while plugging his other ear with a fingertip. His body language was that of a person in an intense phone conversation. Suddenly, the Admiral hung up the phone call he was on and dialed someone else. Meanwhile, back at the portal, it now appeared Jason was doing something. That gesture he is making is a traditional gesture of respect, Terry explained. I think he's going to speak. Jason opened his mouth and spoke something in a language nobody in the portal room had ever heard him speak before. It sounded strangely like the language the aliens were speaking. Another sharp intake of breath, this time from not only the aliens, but also from each of the humans looking on through the portal. What the heck was that he just did? Asked Diana. He just greeted them, said Terry, and bid them peace.
How in the world does he know their language? Asked Lieutenant Flume. Terry, of course, knew exactly how Jason learned the Galimarian language. It had been downloaded into his mind when he first put on the amulet. But since she was keeping secret the existence of the amulet and the effects it has on the mind, she just replied, He might know only a few phrases, but I think he's a quick study. He is pretty smart about that kind of thing, added Dennis, unknowingly buying into Terry's ruse. Last year, when we traveled to Sweden for a physics conference, I was amazed how well he did over there. One of them is asking him how he knows their language, Terry said. He replied that there are a lot of things he has to share with them, and he's requesting to speak with the Grand Council of New Galimar. The what? Asked Diana. The Grand Council of New Galimar is their version of Congress. It's their ruling body on the island, and, to be honest, it's pretty smart of him to ask to speak to them directly. By this time, Admiral Brenstock had finished his phone calls and rejoined the group. More words were spoken by one of the aliens who was acting as their spokesman. Then the group began moving away from the viewpoint of the portal. Wait, what's happening? Asked Diana urgently. That guy said he would take Jason to the Grand Council, so apparently that's where they're going, replied Terry. Okay, said Dennis, getting up from his position in front of the cryogenics control station where he normally was positioned. I can change the parameters on Jason's station so we can follow him. Hold it, called out the Admiral. Dennis stopped in his tracks. Stepping toward Jason's workstation and turning to face the group, Kenji said, I have just gotten off the phone with the USGS. They reported to me something which I had to verify with my contacts at the seismological laboratory at the California Institute of Technology. The team at Yellowstone reported a sudden and complete cessation of seismological activity. For reasons they don't understand, the thousands of minor quakes at Yellowstone reflecting magma movement in the chamber below the park have completely stopped, along with any magma movement. That's great, said Dennis. That means he did it. That isn't possible, said Terry. He only just left the view of the portal. He hasn't had enough time to even begin talking to the council. To quote a movie, you're not thinking in the fourth dimension. Yeah, I seem to have a problem with that, replied Terry. The events Jason is setting in motion have already happened in our timeline, reasoned Dennis. The fact that the earthquakes have stopped means Jason was successful in stopping them from dying off. This means they're still alive, and they have fixed the machine on the island. Terry's eyes grew wide. Did you just say they are still alive? They have to be, responded Dennis. How else would the machine have been fixed? Terry's knees felt like they were about to buckle. The thought that Krelon might actually be alive was both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. She had become resigned to the idea she was in love with a person she would never have the opportunity to meet. Kenji decided this was his opportunity to eliminate a particularly nasty burr under his saddle. The insubordination Jason had shown him one too many times was now going to stop.
Deciding to manufacture a story legitimizing what he was about to do, the Admiral said,
"The problem is that Dr. Marsalis was about to release information about this portal. He said that the entire world needed to know about it because the world should decide what to do with it. I tried to reason with him that this was foolhardy and the president needed to be the one in control of the portal technology, but he just wouldn't listen."
"What?" shouted Dennis incredulously. "That's ridiculous."
"It's true,"
responded Kenji. "He would never do that," retorted Diana. "I would stake my life on Jason keeping the secrets of this facility."
"Then you must not value your life, Miss Olaney,"
shot back Kenji with cold, venomous contempt. Diana looked the Admiral square in the eyes and couldn't tell if that was a statement of opinion or a threat to her life. "There is no way I'm going to sit here and listen to this," Dennis said as he started for Jason's console. With a commanding voice he had never heard from the Admiral before, Kenji shouted, "Halt!" Dennis once again stopped short of the console where the Admiral was now hovering. As soon as he looked Kenji eye to eye, the Admiral's gaze swung to a place behind Dennis. Kenji nodded his head. Prior to arriving at the portal facility, Kenji had considered the events that were about to occur and decided he needed to plan for any contingency, including the possibility the aliens would turn out to be hostile. To that end, Kenji came prepared. Turning around, Dennis was shocked to witness a contingent of soldiers, some with weapons at the ready, filling into the portal room. The ones without weapons took positions at the control stations formerly occupied by Jason and Dennis. The rest took their position to each side of the portal and near the control mainframes littered about the room. Several stood near Diana and Terry. Turning back to the Admiral, Dennis said, "What the heck is going on here?"
"Unfortunately, Dr. Green,"
replied Kenji with a monotone voice,
"Dr. Marsalis represents a clear and present threat to national security. I have no choice."
"What are you going to do?" said Dennis, wide-eyed with dread. Kenji stood there for a moment, staring Dennis straight in the eye.
"What I do now, I do for the good of the country,"
he said, reaching over to the USB stick key Jason had placed in the key switch. "No!" shouted Terry and Diana simultaneously. Dennis yelled, "You'll kill him!" The Admiral hesitated momentarily, then, while slowly looking back up at Dennis, twisted the key counterclockwise. With that motion, the park scene in the portal vanished. Diana and Terry, who were holding each other for support, and Dennis, standing helplessly near Kenji, all looked on in disbelief and horror. Their friend, their longtime associate, their mentor, gone with the flick of a switch. Even though Dennis and Diana weren't exactly fans of the Admiral, this was far beyond anything they had expected him to do. Dennis took 2 steps away from Kenji while his gaze faltered. Stepping backward, the feeling in Dennis's legs began to leave, and he collapsed to the floor like a building being demolished. His mouth hung open as he contemplated not only the loss he had suffered, but also, "Oh my God, Mickey." He was dumbfounded how emotionless Kenji demonstrated himself to be. Dennis looked at Admiral Brinstock and saw the former grandfather face, now icy, stony, and callous. With eyes devoid of any concern, the Admiral said,
"Dr. Marsalis decided what side he was on when he chose not to listen to reason. What you have to decide now, Dr. Green, is whether or not you are going to listen to reason."
The threat was clear. Jason had opposed Kenji, and now Jason was gone. gone forever. Now the Admiral was telling Dennis that if he opposed Kenji, he would suffer the same fate. To the side, Diana and Terry were a mass of tears. Dennis looked over and saw they had lost the will to stand as well. They were seated on a bench near the door, each of them holding on to the other for support. "My God, what have you done?" was all Dennis could say.
"I did what was necessary to get rid of a man who made himself a terrorist by his actions,"
said Admiral Brenstock. Instantly, Dennis was not just angry, but infuriated. With an outrage surprising even himself, Dennis leapt up yelling, "Jason was the best of humans! Better than I will ever hope to be, you son of a—"
"Nothing will help him now, Dr. Green,"
interrupted Kenji.
"And if you don't play ball, then you will never see this device again."
"What?" shot back Dennis. The renewed fight was still in him, and the soldiers on either side of Dennis were physically restraining him from attacking Kenji with his bare hands. Admiral Brenstock was attempting a well-played bluff with Dennis. Kenji knew he needed Dennis to operate the portal effectively, but he couldn't let that particular card show in this game of high-stakes poker. Dennis could see right through the attempt at deception, though. He could see Kenji was going to allow him to continue to work on the portal, but that would only happen on Kenji's terms now. Dennis stopped resisting the soldiers who had been holding his arms and straightened his body. Closing his eyes and shaking his head in disgust, Dennis couldn't see any other choice. There wasn't anything he could do for his friend now. But maybe this idiot admiral might still use the portal for some good like he did with those bombers in Houston. Slowly taking in a breath, Dennis relented. "All right, Admiral. You win." Putting on his grandfather voice once again, Kenji said,
Now, Dr. Green, it won't be that bad. You and I eliminating the terrorists of the world, it's what this thing was meant to do."
Resuming a cold and icy stance once again, Kenji reached over and unplugged the USB key he had earlier turned.
"But this key is going to stay with me. Without it, you won't be able to get any bright,"
the Admiral paused for emphasis,
"and dangerous ideas."
The message was clear. Either Dennis did exactly as the Admiral said, or his life would be snuffed out as Jason's had been. It was silent in the room now, except for the ambient sounds of some minor machinery and the fluorescent ballasts humming in the high distance. Kenji walked out the door, and the soldiers followed him, one by one. The last one to leave the room was Lieutenant Flume, who glanced back at Dennis, slumped again in a chair near Jason's console. Looking at him, Dennis sensed a sorrowfulness, completely out of sync from the Admiral. Larry Flume looked down at the floor as he stepped out the door, closing it behind him. Diana, Terry, and Dennis were the only ones left in the portal room. Diana rose and walked over to sit next to Dennis. "What do we have to do to get him back?"
"We can't,"
replied Dennis. "Sure we can. Just make a new key," Diana said with irritation.
"I can't. Because the portal could be used for bad as well as good. Jason and I created our own encryptions for each of these keys. I don't know what Jason's encryption was for his key."
"Then we're going to have to find a way to steal the key from Kenji," said Diana.
Again, Dennis said, "We can't."
"What is this with can't, said Diana in an irritated voice. He replied in just as irritated a voice,
"You don't get it, do you? No matter what we do, we will never be able to reestablish the same bridge to Jason. Even if we did have the key, which we don't, we've figured out it is impossible to establish the exact same path
in space-time, in the exact same spot in the timeline. The math tells us that if we attempted to go back to the same spot and pull him back, it would cause a rip in space-time, most likely causing a cascade effect that would grow as it progressed to our point in the timeline. For all we know, we'd end up creating a chain reaction that would make it a very bad day for everybody in the neighborhood. Dennis got up from his chair and walked to one of the wooden file cabinets in the room. Uttering a colorful metaphor, he slammed his fist down on it, causing some of the accoutrements on top to shift around. Diana didn't understand completely, but she could see Dennis knew what he was talking about. Her hands dropped to her lap, and she just looked at Terry. "Then he's gone," said Terry. "He's really gone." There was no reply.
Hey, fellow Galimarians, this is Dan Adrian, and I just wanted to say thank you for listening to my book. If you can, please click like down below because it really helps me bring these videos to you and lets me know what you like. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe and click on the bell so that you'll get notified when I release more chapters. If you have any questions about this or any other of my books, or if you want to know more about what it takes to write a novel like this one, please make sure you leave your question in the comments below. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.